There we go.
Sorry, brand new computer.
No problem.
Good to go. All right. Welcome to the Willamette Week endorsement interview for House District 34. All right. And yeah, we'll structure this not really as a debate, but we're going to ask questions to you both. Can't guarantee similar time to both people, but we'll see how it goes. So just to get this started, just if I could get you both to, we'll first kind of introduce your district and introduce yourself.
Wait, can we just do one thing first?
Oh,
We
yeah,
need
sure.
ages, unless you've done it, unless I missed it.
No, and also tell
Sorry.
us your age.
The age you'll be on the 17th when the story runs, when the endorsements come out.
You want to go first?
Yes, I'll go first. My name is Lisa Reynolds. I use she, her pronouns. I am 58 years old.
I'm 57.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Worse.
It's strictly the late 50s. There's no way around that. And I'm running for House District 34, which includes, which is composed mostly of unincorporated Washington County, the communities of Bethany, Oak Hills, Cedar Hills, Bonnie Slope, and then we do have a part of Beaverton, which is the Five Oaks neighborhood of Beaverton in the district.
Nice.
Does that answer the question?
Just give us a little bit of an intro about you.
Oh,
why
sure.
you're
Sorry
running,
about that.
If
Yeah.
you've your prior.
Yeah. So I am in my first term in the Oregon legislature. I'm currently representing House District 36, which includes much of Portland's west side. And because of redistricting, I made the move out to Washington County, which is where I've been practicing pediatrics for over 20 years, where a lot of my patients live. And I decided to get into politics because of what I was seeing as a pediatrician, seeing what is and what is not working for Oregon families. And I decided I wanted to do more for them than what I could accomplish in the exam room. And getting near the end of my first term, I feel I've only just begun, and so I'm excited to run for a second term to do more than what I've started on.
Great. And you, John?
I'm John Woods. I'm running for House District 34. I'm 75 years old. I just turned 75 in October the 4th. I'm a veteran. I'm a gun owner. I was asked to run for House District 34 by the GOP, so I said yes. I wanted to make this as a learning experience for me to see how to run a campaign and see what I can address as far as issues that I see in Oregon, which we have a tremendous amount of issues in Oregon that seem to be just not being addressed. That's it.
Could you just quickly, when you say you were asked to run, we've heard this before. I'm just curious, who asked you to run, and where was that?
It was actually 2 hours before the deadline, and one of the people from the Washington County GOP called me and asked me if they run because the seat was going to be empty, and I said, my wife actually asked my wife first, and then she said no because she had too much on the plate. Then they asked me, and I said yes, I will run, having no idea what I was getting myself into, but saying that I wanted to be able to address some of these issues that we're dealing with.
Great. All right, so let's start out with these issues. For both of you, just kind of like you're already there, but what going in is going to be your first major bill or issue that you want to address? So you go first.
Thank you for the question. What I'm focusing on for the 2023 session is starting my 5-year plan to reduce childhood poverty. As a pediatrician, when I think about the health of my patients and the families, I really look at what we call the social determinants of health, which includes access to enough food, access to health care, housing, and we know that the through line for all of that is poverty. So I am really focused on coming forward with a plan to cut Oregon's child poverty rate by 1/2 in the next 5 years.
How are you going to do that?
There are a variety of levers in which we can pull to do that, and I'm still formulating them. I will tell you that I have been helped quite a bit by the recent announcement of the Medicaid waiver that Oregon was granted after I already made that goal, which would include that healthcare dollars can be used to pay for families' housing and augment their food. So there are a lot of different ways to impact poverty. One is to give people more money or more services, and then to reduce what they have to spend on things things such as housing and food. The other thing that would help quite a bit is if the U.S. Congress would make permanent the child tax credits. We know that when those were in place for the year during the pandemic, child poverty during that time was cut in half. So I could have an easy out. I shouldn't say I could have an easy out. Children could be helped very quickly if that happens after the 2022 election, but there are a variety of ways to do it.
Well, sorry, again, just to put you on the spot, like that's something Congress can do. What is something the state can do right now?
Right, no, thank you. So what the state could do right now is if we could make sure everyone has housing so that families aren't putting half of their take-home pay into rent. And again, the Medicaid waiver that allows healthcare dollars to pay for families' housing, because housing is healthcare, would go a long way, I think, to alleviate child poverty. To improve SNAP benefits, the supplemental nutrition for at-risk families. That's not what it stands for. I'm so sorry, I can't remember exactly what it stands for. Yeah, food stamps. If we could increase food stamps, as Oregon Food Bank says, and what I hear from my families, their food benefits often run out about week 3, and I hear this in my exam room. It's heartbreaking. That's where the food banks, kick in, and that's awesome. But we should not have to have food banks to feed Oregon's children. So those are a couple things. I think there are some interesting programs we could do on some basic income for families. There are pilot programs in Multnomah County. Governor Kitzhaber has talked about some programs he's looking at throughout the state to actually give families money, especially when they have young children. And even, I personally think this is the morally right thing to do for families. We will alleviate a lot of human suffering. We will alleviate a lot of families' involvement with the child welfare system. But let's also admit it, it's cost effective. We either pay now or pay later. We know that children who are raised in poverty have a higher rate of being impoverished adults. Children who are raised in poverty tend to have a lower rate of graduation from high school. So it's morally the right thing to do, but it turns out to be fiscally sound as well.
Awesome. All right, thank you. And John, you next. What would be your first big policy issue that you want to address?
First of all, I would put is that I would make it so that any legislator that's in a district, like an urban district, has to contact if they put forth a law that affects like Eastern Oregon, like the ranchers and the farmers, they have to have a buy-in by the representative of that county. We had representatives who were urban representatives who were putting forth bills to monitor the water around ranchers and farmers in Eastern Oregon. If my thing is they need to stay in their lane. They need to check with the people who are representing that district and not get over into doing things that they're interested in other people's districts. They don't talk to the farmers, they don't talk to the ranchers, and they just put these bills up. So my first thing would be, you need to check with that representative in that district, bottom line.
How would you enforce that? Would it be like requiring someone from both party being involved in any bill that's passed, or like technically how would that work?
It wouldn't even have to be both parties. It would have to be the representative of the farmers and the ranchers in Eastern Oregon.
Got it.
Whoever that representative is, if it's a senator, if it's a representative, if they put forth a bill that they want to, like our representative in this district before he moved over another district, put forth a bill to monitor the wells of the ranchers in Eastern Oregon. And the idea was that they were stealing water. I don't know how he knew that, but he stated that. So I say, if you represent that district and if somebody else comes to monitor your well, or if a rural representative decides to put some kind of a thing on the urban areas, then they have to check with the representatives, so we have some kind of a buy-in that it just continues this rural-urban split that we have so much of the time. It just causes all kinds of hate and discontent.
Got it. All right, so Lisa, I guess this is really just a question for you, because you're the one that's currently in the legislature, but what was your biggest accomplishment so far, you feel?
Oh, there's been a couple. I would say probably my most exciting moment as a legislator was working on Senate Bill 554, which requires safe storage of guns in the home. It also allows schools to prohibit guns on their campuses, and it keeps guns out of the Capitol. I got my political start doing gun violence prevention work with Moms Demand Action, and of course as a pediatrician I talk to families all the time about the importance of safe storage. So this is work I'd been doing for years before I became a legislator, so being part of that process of getting that bill over the finish line in 2021 was an incredibly rewarding moment.
And I can guess the answer, but I'm going to ask both of you, what is your position on, I believe it's Measure 114 is gun control, right?
I support Measure
Okay.
114.
Support,
Thank
right.
you.
And John, how do you feel about Measure 114?
Absolutely against it. There is no structure for doing anything. There are no trainers, there are no ranges, there are no ways to do it, and there's no money to do it. So it can't be done. We're from New York. We went through a permit system. We know what the permit system does. Literally, there is no range in Oregon that will train these people. So how do you get a gun if you can't be trained?
Hey, I'm sorry, John, did you submit testimony for House Bill 4005? There's a John Woods who submitted testimony
Probably.
on a gun bill.
Oh, I testified on all the gun bills.
Yeah, it's like if Patrick Henry were alive today, he would nail a copy of the Bill of Rights to the front door of the Capitol building. Does that sound like
Yep.
you? Okay. Okay, so you've laid out your position here pretty clearly.
Well, the Second, Fourth, Fifth Amendment specifically say that we have the rights to firearms. The government does not have a right to come in and do illegal search and seizure. And the Fifth Amendment says basically that we can't incriminate ourselves. So,
Can I-
I want to know how Bill 544, how that can even be done. Because you can't come through my front door without a warrant. I'm doing nothing illegal with my gun, so they're coming to my front door and saying, "What are you doing with your guns?" I say, "Hey, until you have a warrant, you can't come in the front door."
So you're saying 554 is unconstitutional?
554.
Has there been any legal challenges to it, or has there been any legal challenges to Senate Bill 554?
Yeah, but I haven't done any legal challenge, but I'm saying that the Second, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments, it doesn't allow them to come through the front door without a warrant.
Just as a little academic, but how do you read the clause in the Second Amendment that talks about a well-regulated militia? Why is that there, and what does it mean?
It means that they saw that they needed a militia at that point in time. Do we need one now? I don't know that. All I know is the front part of it says that our rights with a gun will not be infringed.
So we just ignore the militia part?
I'm not gonna fight it. I don't know. I don't have enough expertise to say what that really means.
Okay. Representative Reynolds, do you happen to know the statistics on how much your risk of dying of gun violence goes up when there's a gun in the home?
I know for women when there's a gun in the home and there's domestic violence, their chance of being killed goes up, I believe, 5-fold. And certainly we know in terms of accidental gun deaths, that goes, which of course, hard to say, how does that go up? Because if there's no gun in the home, when there's a gun in the home, the chance of accidental gun deaths go up several-fold too. But the number I think that I've heard most about is about domestic violence. And we know also that when there's a gun in the home, it's much more likely that it'll be used unintentionally to harm someone who is known in the home.
John, do you think people are safer with guns in their houses?
Do I?
Yeah.
That isn't the point. The point is the Second Amendment gives me the right to have that firearm. It does not give me the right to come into my house looking for that firearm or to take it. Do I think that I'm more safe? I think, like I said, the Second Amendment stands in front of anybody trying to take that gun from my home.
Okay.
From a purely policy question on 114, you said you're from New York, and you said you went through the permit system. What was your experience with the permit system in New York? Like, what are you worried is going to happen if Oregon institutes this?
Do you really want to? Okay, here's the deal. The permit system, when we made the permit, and when I made the application note, when I put that I was a veteran on that application, they put a big red circle on that veteran. It took me 4 years to even get to the top of the pile, because every time I got to the top of the pile, they would look at the veteran thing and they'd push it down to the bottom. And I had one of the state troopers who was doing it told me they were doing that for the veterans. My wife got her permit in 6 months. It took me over 4 years and I never got it. And with the permit system, we have a friend who ran a gun shop. There was a state trooper who they wouldn't give a permit to, so he had to take his gun off at the end of his shift, lockbox it in the station, go home, and the next morning come back and get his firearm out of that lockbox because they wouldn't give him a permit. So here's a guy who's carrying a gun during the time he's doing the work, and they won't give him a permit because he was a veteran, a combat veteran. He was Vietnam, just like I am, and they wouldn't give him a permit. So there are abuses in this permit system up and down the chain.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we? Let's turn to an issue that's huge here, which is homelessness. Some people divide this issue into housing first and shelter first. I'm skeptical of that division, but it's helpful as a construct. Would you characterize yourself as housing first or shelter first? And we'll start with you, Representative Reynolds.
Thanks for that question. You know, last week I spent a few hours out in front of the Society Hotel in Old Town with Jesse Burke, who owns the hotel, and Scott Kerman, who runs Blanchet House, and it's pretty chilling. And I think we've all walked through those neighborhoods or driven by, and it certainly just reinforced my belief that we need to get people into some sort of housing, shelter, tiny home village, sanctioned campsite with hygiene services as quickly as possible. So I think I would probably say I'm shelter first. Of course, I believe permanent housing is the ultimate goal, but it's going to take a long time before we get there. We can't have people living in squalor on our streets while we're waiting for, you know, beautiful permanent housing units to be built. So I guess I'm a shelter first person, but let's build those units of permanent housing for sure.
Yeah. What do you make of the pace of setting up Safe Rest Villages and other things like that? Because I know Safe Rest Village has its own brand, but those sorts of solutions, how we do it? It seems like that's a slow rollout to me. Am I
Super
right?
slow, shockingly slow, disappointingly slow. And when I start hearing some of the not in my backyard stuff from neighbors when they look to place it somewhere, I get a little bit of empathy for how slow it's going, but now I have learned about the slowness of bureaucracy, and it's very frustrating. We don't have time. So I really wish it was going more quickly. I wish we were looking at some sanctioned campsites again with maybe some security and certainly hygiene services. But I share your concern. It's also unbelievably expensive, which is I think why some people are in the housing first camp, right? Like if we have this kind of interim shelter housing, it's almost as expensive. The reality is they're quicker to get up and running, and we need to get things up and running as quickly as possible.
So obviously the big issue is where you're going to put them.
Right.
You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Where are you going to put them?
Well, the way I think about it is people are sleeping on sidewalks all around the city, so I don't understand why neighborhoods are saying not in our backyard. It's already happening in our backyard. So I think that from what I've heard from Portland City Commissioner Dan Ryan and his team is the Multnomah Village was skeptical about the Safe Rest Village that went in adjacent there. And it's turned out to be a very positive thing where community members are volunteering in the area. area, doing some gardening. So hopefully that can become a model for other communities to actually, maybe if not embrace, but at least not put up the big hand. I mean, these folks are in our communities anyway.
Sorry, let me be more clear. In your district?
Oh, in my district? Yeah. Well, yeah, that's probably my current district. In my, in House District 34? No, absolutely. We know that, so House District 34, which is Beaverton and unincorporated Washington County, has among the highest rate of homeless youth in the state. And a lot of them are, it's a little bit less visible because a lot of them are couch surfing and incredibly unstable situations. So if that community of the we call them the unaccompanied youth, told me that they would be really interested in a tiny home village, that's something I'd really want to hear from them, or a sanctioned campsite or whatever, so there's some permanence. I would absolutely push to have that in House District 34, no question. I think that would be embraced. And on the doors, it's what everyone brings up as their top concern.
And you're not going to
Yep.
John, what do you think? Homeless solutions.
I worked in a food pantry at a church for over 3 or 4 years. Every single one of those people who was homeless that I knew that were friends are dead now. We tried to get them into shelters. We were dealing with 3 different problems. We were dealing with the poverty, we were dealing with the drug use, and we were dealing with the mental issues. So when you offer somebody an apartment, a home, whatever, and say, are you willing to go in? And they say, absolutely not. They want to stay on the street. What do you do? Everybody, and I see this homeless thing as 3 different problems: poverty, drug use, and mental illness. So we tried a bunch of different things, and we couldn't get a lot of the people into those shelters or into that housing. They didn't want it. Every one of them that I know is now dead.
Everyone you served in the soup kitchen?
Homeless people, every one of them is now dead that I was friends with.
So are you saying that,
Wow.
are you saying that the state doesn't have any solutions to offer for people like that? Or are you saying that we just haven't found the right ones?
What do you do when you go and you offer them food, shelter, and everything else, and they say absolutely not, they're not going in there? What do? Do you send the cops? Do you arrest them? Do you incarcerate them? What do you do? That's the question that I want to understand. What do you do? That's what we wrestled with 4 or 5 years ago. They knew they were out on the street. They were living a lifestyle that they liked, no restraints, and we kept running into this over and over and over again. How do you get these people in their shelter if they absolutely refuse?
Do you have any ideas there?
Not really. There are a lot of people who say, well, send the cops. What good does that do? Then it just gets into a fist fight or a struggle with the cops. The cops are overloaded now with crime. So I still come back to, how do you force these people who are homeless, want to be homeless, and want to stay on the street into shelters? There was no answer.
Well, that's a great
for
question.
us.
Do you want to try to answer that question?
Thanks for that, John. Yeah, I mean, I think the chronically homeless, which is what John is referring to, is a small subset, but it is a real problem. My understanding, again, this is after spending time with Scott Kerman and Jesse Burke, that a lot of the chronic homeless have severe substance use disorders or mental health issues. This isn't a lifestyle choice. This isn't we like living out here. It's that they are unable to function certainly to be given an apartment. I think it is a really difficult issue. I have a severely mentally ill brother who was homeless a bit this summer, and we did send the cops out after him because we knew that it was going to either end badly for him or that he was going to act out in a way. And that, the cops confronted him, and he actually appeared pretty well, so they didn't do anything with him, and it took a family member to take him to the hospital. So he was not at a point where he would have agreed to do any of that. So I was a little, I'll admit, as a family member, I was a little frustrated that the police weren't willing to take him in, but there are patient rights, right? So do we need to readdress that? It's a very, very sticky wicket, but I think that is, we're looking to confront that a little bit here in Portland.
Well, so I didn't know, so you have family experience with this. I mean,
Yeah.
let's talk about mental illness. I mean, obviously the state is, sadly struggling with this.
Yeah.
What,
Why did I walk into that? No.
what do you want to do going forward? What would you like to see the state?
In terms of the chronically mentally ill on the streets, or just overall mental
addressing
health?
Mental health in the
Oh,
state.
yeah. Thanks for that tiny question. No, I'm teasing. So I have been on the behavioral health committee. So it's a very legit question, especially for me. I've been on the behavioral health committee now, finishing my second year, and the state has devoted kind of a record amount of resources over the past 2 years into mental health services. Are we reaping the benefits? Not quite. I think things are still taking time. We're standing up a lot of peer respite centers. We're waiting for this behavioral health resource center to open here in Multnomah County. I think my biggest regret about the spending is I didn't push hard enough to get more spending for youth and adolescent mental health services. But I do think we are starting to divert resources there. Long overdue. It's like this parched desert and we're starting to pour water on it. But I do think we need more community-based programs, and we just need more providers. And I see it in my practice quite a bit. So I'm a pediatrician, so I certainly have my share of adolescents who are struggling with mental health issues. Luckily, not significantly severe mental health like my brother who's schizophrenic, but and there's a lot I can do as a general pediatrician, and we have behavioral health services in our clinic, which is awesome. But there is that subset of kids who need long-term therapy, and it's always challenging to get those kids connected with the right provider. So we need more providers. We need more innovative ways to train people up. We need to think about different types of certificates and degrees.
Well, let me just push on this.
Yes.
I mean, I know that
Yes.
over the last 2 years, obviously, first of all, given that there is some frustration about how slow the money went out in Measure
Totally.
110,
Yes.
and, obviously we're putting a lot of money out there in mental health services, are there practical things in your head that you want the state to do right now to both make sure that money goes in the right places and to, make sure going forward we continue to invest in it?
Great question. And I kind of joke that getting the money out is the easy part, and I have to admit there are agency heads that their slideshow's all about how much money's going out. I'm like, that doesn't matter, right? So we're having real-time auditing of Measure 110 through the Secretary of State's office, and I'm really happy about that. And we need to continue to audit what's happening then separately, but obviously overlapping. We need to audit and make sure what's happening with the funds that have gone out for behavioral health services. I will tell you, hear from a lot of behavioral health providers that things are feeling much better. Their pay has gone up. They've been able to retain workforce, and this is through a bill, whose bill number I'm not going to remember. Maybe it was 4004, to give bonuses and increase the pay of our behavioral health workers because they've long been underpaid. So those things have made a big difference. I've talked to folks at the Morrison Center, and they were really grateful. And they're like, we don't have a 4-week waiting list anymore. We have about a 10-day waiting list. So some things that we've done are working, and that's for
That's the
you.
first helpful thing I've heard about.
Yeah.
Behavioral health. And
Yes.
My wife works a little bit in that area, and it's like,
Thank her for me.
well, not
Yeah.
directly. It's
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
so we are starting to see some, again, all too slow, but we need to keep auditing it and not just check the box once the money's gone off the door. And I'm still trying to learn how to do that, with the help of Rep. Nose and Senator Lieber, who are trying to watch that very closely.
All right, thank you. John, to you, what are you in favor of the increased investments the state has been making the last few years for behavioral health and drug abuse treatment? And do you want to continue those investments?
Say that again, I didn't understand.
In terms of continuing to invest in mental health treatment and just behavioral health treatment in general, are you in favor of those investments, spending a substantial amount of money, and do you want to continue those investments?
Sure, but I'd still come back to how are you going to get these mentally ill people into the program? They absolutely refuse to go in. They don't trust anybody. The problem is well, the church we're going to, Sunrise Church, ended up shutting down on their homeless center because there was so many violent, mentally ill people there that they couldn't continue to have the staff be in danger. So the question still comes back to, how do you force these people into a program? You could spend all kinds of money. They want to stay on the street. They don't trust anybody. So how do you do that? That still comes down to the question, how do you get them into treatment?
Well, I'm just concerned that you, I want someone to answer that question for me. I mean, do you really have no answers to that? It seems like if we're going to spend billions and billions of dollars.
Are you going to send the police? Are you going to send the marshals, the sheriffs, or whoever? Who has the authority to help these people get into treatment, especially if they don't want? And patients' rights, they just say no. So it still comes back to, how do you get them into treatment?
Well, that's a great question. How?
We just tried that one. I mean, we just.
No, but I was trying to be more specific. What is the role of the criminal justice system?
Well, that's, it's interesting because obviously that's where a lot of these people end up, whether it's through, crime. I know in Old Town, apparently the pavers just come up, and the folks have been using that to break windows, often when there are, high or on this new synthetic meth. And so they are ending up in jail. I don't imagine that that's a great place for them, especially since I don't think they do detox as part of that. But I do wonder if there is some middle ground, right? You have crossed a line in society. We're going to put you in a place that hopefully has some more wraparound services than just a jail cell. And maybe it could be a way for someone who's committed a crime to maybe get treatment. What I'm hearing from the folks who work with these clients is that if they're arrested, they're released right away. So they're not even getting the cruel detox, let alone a medically supervised detox.
So do you support this? Because obviously this kind of comes down to, we talked about shelter versus housing first. So there's also kind of this dichotomy between believing that, expand the state hospital, expand community services, or both. Do you have a sense of what you want your strategy to be in terms of where we're going to be investing this money?
Well, I would definitely say expand community services. I think, and that what I'm envisioning is that would include maybe a step down for folks who are currently in the hospital who don't necessarily need hospital level care. I think that a lot of folks who are in the state hospital could really benefit from a community-based, secure facility that isn't the full-on Oregon State Hospital. So, I do think
those being built?
Yes. There's a name for them, but I can't remember what they're
SRTFs?
called. Yes.
Okay, so because I know this is a serious problem. Multnomah County has 16 SRTF beds right now. 16.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of. I personally have concerns that we've had 2 years and $300 million to try to fix this, and we still have 16 SRTF.
Yes. No, it's a very good point.
How do you have? I want you to have a plan to make more SRTF beds in the next 2 years. Do you have? How would we make this happen?
There's always this debate between the county and the state on who decides how that money gets used. But but it sounds to me like we need to have a statewide plan for more of those secure residential treatment beds for sure. Especially as we're getting into more and more lawsuits and more parameters on how the Oregon State Hospital is being used. The fact that we don't have room for our civilly committed patients is what's particularly concerning to a lot of us in the medical world right now. I take care of kids, so it's a different story, but my friends who are adult psychiatrists, we don't have many beds for civil commit because of those folks who are doing the restoration so that they can stand trial.
Yeah.
I puzzle over this because when you go to a place, let's say a similar sized city like Providence, Rhode Island, say, you don't see tents and people living in the streets and all of this. And so if homelessness is primarily caused by mental illness, you would sort of expect to see similar levels of homelessness around the country, because unless Oregon has some vastly outsized population of people who are mentally ill. My theory My theory is that if I were to spend 3 nights outside, I would not be a well person. I would be sleep deprived. I would be away from whatever medication I'm on. I'd be scared, and I would begin to show signs of mental illness.
Bingo.
And
Yeah.
so I think, I think there's, and I've also read studies recently that said it really is a housing problem. It is a housing market that is just too expensive. It's forcing people into the streets. They get in the streets and their weaknesses begin to emerge. We all have them, and that's where they would come out. Do you think that, so this has pushed me toward more of a housing first, let's get people into housing, whatever it looks like, change the building codes so we can build this stuff. It doesn't matter what it looks like. As long as there's a door that's shut and a bathroom and a little kitchen, that's great. Does that resonate with either of you?
100%. I totally, when you said, I totally don't agree that people are houseless because they're mentally ill, for the most part. I think that a lot of the mental illness is secondary to being homeless, as is some of the substance use disorder, not all of it. And, State Rep Tana Sanchez, who's a mentor of mine, she says, just for a minute, pretend you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight, right? And your heart starts racing and you break out in a sweat. I mean, it's terrifying to think, let alone a mother with 2 kids. So, and, to be honest, these are probably folks who are already impoverished and maybe don't have a lot of resources, emotional or physical or financial, and so they may have already been a little bit on the margin of certainly toxic stress. So absolutely, being on the streets is going to kick you over. For sure.
It's a good word. So should we just be trying to build as much housing as possible? Urban growth boundary be damned, sort of get the contractors from Texas who built all that housing in Houston and be like, hey, go nuts. I mean,
not a bad thought. I mean, I think it's definitely really valuable, and it's and if we can, the advantage of preventing someone from becoming homeless or having to spend 3 nights on the street, huge, right? Huge cost savings, but also morally, it's the right thing to do. But yeah, no, I hear what you're saying.
Easier said than done, right?
Easier said than done, but it shouldn't be that hard.
Well, it seems like it is.
I know. I know.
Yeah, John, do you have a feeling about building a lot of housing?
Yeah, but one other observation. We went on a tour through Arizona and Utah. We went to the canyons. The only time we saw homeless camps was when we dropped back into Oregon. None in Arizona, none in Utah. And I think but at least those 2 states. So the question is, why did I cross the line into Oregon and see a homeless camp almost immediately? But yes, the housing stuff is crazy. The amount of rent and amount of mortgage that you have to pay here is insane. We had a house that was bigger than the one we have here. And we are getting to the point where the property taxes and rent are what New York was, and they were number 1 in the nation 3 or 4 years ago.
When did you move from New York?
Huh?
When did you move from New York?
10 years ago. We moved here because our grandsons were growing up and we wanted to be here. Elaine was a teacher, I worked for Eastman Kodak. We both retired and we said, where do we want to go? We said Oregon, and we said Oregon has no snow. So that was big.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
I sold my snowblower immediately and left New York.
Were you in Rochester?
Yep.
Yeah.
I worked 22 years for Eastman Kodak. I worked in the research labs, but I also went, right after 9/11, I was assigned to the New York City Police Department to do forensic photography from the buildings. So that was a tough assignment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Picking up ID cards and wobbly cards and desk photographs of people who were in the buildings. They were asking us where they were located, so we had to do the forensic photography. I worked with the detectives on Staten Island. I was at the Freshkill landfill for a while, and then came home, and then they shipped all the boxes to us, and I spent the next 6 to 7 months just going through photographs of people that had them on the desk and making it, trying to make an identification of who they were, going through wedding albums, all kinds of stuff. But for 3 or 4 months after that, I suffered from PTSD because I was seeing those people's faces when I went to bed at night. I could not get them out of my mind.
Thank you for your service on that.
Yeah.
That's a heavy lift.
It was incredibly gratifying to hear the families say, "You gave me something that my husband or wife or whatever was carrying at the time they died, and
Wow.
you guys gave it back to us in a pristine condition." Because that's what I did. I was doing restoration of old photographs and stuff before 9/11. I was one of the 3 people that they sent to New York to take care of all of their personal artifacts. Like I said, the wall photos and everything. It was really tough to see. We'd have to scan both sides. We'd have to scan the picture, then we'd have to flip it over and see what the loved one wrote on the back, like
Oh my.
"Dear Daddy" or something like that. It just tore me up inside. I like I said, I spent 3 or 4 months not being able to sleep. I ended up going to a psychiatrist. I had some rage and everything, typical PTSD. And even now, when I smell, being on Fresh Kills was a biohazard site. It was 2.5 or 3 acres of biohazard site because there was so much dead bodies that had come down and were literally shredded in the dust, and the decon smell, you couldn't get it out of your clothes, couldn't get it out. I ended up throwing all my clothes away. And Department of Homeland Security was there, and we worked in New York City Police Department on that.
Gosh, that's about the hardest
Yes.
assignment I've heard.
Yeah.
And now you're retired, but you're willing to jump back into politics. You probably have a pretty nice thing going right now.
I'm a professional photographer. I love shooting. I love shooting Oregon. Oregon is one of the most beautiful places in the world. But we can't continue to go down the road we are. People are so unhappy. Even upstate New York, people were happy and just had it. But just Oregon, I don't understand them. It's just, they seem to be so unhappy and at each other's throats. And literally, I don't understand it. I literally don't. So when they asked me to run, I said yes, reluctantly.
John, do you have any other
I want to
political
make a
experience?
difference.
Do you have any prior experience, civic experience?
Nope, not at all. It's all new to me. I'm all a rookie. I have no idea. But my wife and I were both activists in the building for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, they asked. Did you say they asked your wife first? Why'd they come to her first?
She's standing right here. Why did they ask you first?
Because they knew I'm a stable voice. They knew she was a stable voice. One of the things we did was we have a friend who's a Vietnam veteran. He has 5 Purple Hearts. We were the ones that carried the SB 993 Purple Heart bill. We went to every single legislator in the building. We got it all signed. So we had unanimous signature for the Purple Heart designation bill. So we got to know all of the people in the building.
Okay, so they knew. So I see. Okay, that makes sense. That's some hard work too. All right.
Not so much once people knew what we were up to, and once they knew what the bill was about, and honoring the veterans and making it Purple Heart Designation Day. And the reason we did that is because one of our mentors had died just before that. Name was Sandy Rideau, and so Brian Boquist wrote the bill in honor of Sandy Rideau and honor his husband.
Was this the last session? Anyway.
John,
okay.
Just to circle back really fast, just quickly, is there any gun control bill that you would support?
The only gun control bill, the only gun control bill I would support is that criminals be taken off the street and their firearms are taken away. We have a problem in Oregon because we have the same problem that New York did, is that we have the criminals run with the guns. The other thing that really bothers me is the open southern border. We have the drugs coming across, we have the illegal immigration. You think that there's not fully automatic weapons coming across the southern border that are being sold to the organizations in Oregon? It's got to be a massive amount of guns coming in here.
I think we're exporting guns.
We have the criminals, and they talk about having the guns and, the stolen guns, the serial numbers on the gun. The serial number on the gun doesn't do anything once that gun is stolen. That criminal doesn't care if he has a serial number on it or not. He cares that it works. So what is he going to do? Is he going to go and do a background check before he pulls it out of his belt and goes right up to the plant pantry? I mean, really, it's what the serial number is. The manufacturer traces the gun, the legal gun owner buys it, uses the serial number to get a background check. The background check comes through. That gun's stolen. It goes into a black market. And that serial number there, who knows? Do they take it off?
Okay,
Who knows?
so
do they use it with it?
Okay, so Representative Reynolds, do you think that guns can be regulated? It sounds like John is skeptical.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
do you
I mean,
believe there's
yes,
a
and
way for-
yes, and there's plenty of evidence, and I can send you the website, that states that have stronger gun laws have less gun violence. So we can regulate guns, and it works to reduce gun violence. That's why I'm.
All right.
What's the bill? What's the referent?
Measure 114.
Which 114?
We're-
We already did that. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we checked.
Okay, so
right.
one final fun question for you
Fun
guys.
question.
Oh, good.
Which you want to ask it?
You go ahead. You're on a roll. This is good. You're the
Okay.
chair. You have to ask this question.
All right, so the question is, the world is ending tomorrow, and you get
What?
the last meal. I know, it's a hypothetical.
Okay. I don't know,
Hopefully.
maybe not.
And what is the one food that you would want to have for your last meal? So the one specific food. All right, Representative, you want to go?
I think it would, I guess I'd have to say my grandmother's spaghetti and meatballs.
Nice. That's what I said.
You Italian?
Is that what you said? My grandmother is. Yeah, my mom is.
Wow,
Yeah.
from where?
Sicily.
Same.
Oh, really?
We'll go.
Do you have any
Hang on.
ties to the?
All right, okay. John, what would your food be?
My wife's chicken soup probably is so good that I probably survived the end of the world.
Good answer.
Fantastic.
Good answer, John.
All right.
Well, thank you both.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Hey, can I do this?
Stay safe.
Nice to meet
Thank
you,
you
John.
for your time, John.